Welcome back to Raised by Giants. I'm Ryder Lee, and tonight we have an amazing interview for you guys. I kind of stopped doing interviews like this, but the opportunity came a knocking, and who am I to deny the universe, right? When such an amazing author is going to be on your show. So tonight we have author Maureen Seaberg. Her column in Psychology Today was the first to report on the groundbreaking developments surrounding our senses. She is a contributor to the New York Times, National Geographic, Huffington Post, ESPN, the magazine Vogue, and many other outlets. She's appeared on CNN, NPR, Oprah Radio, MSNBC, and PBS. She lives in New York City, and her most recent book is Fearfully and Wonderfully Made, The Astonishing New Science of the Senses, and will be available wherever books are sold on August 8th, 2023. How's
Hello,
it going, Maureen?
Ryder.
Good to see you.
Very well. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And hello to your amazing audience, too. Thank you.
Yes, I'm very excited to and looking forward to diving into consciousness and extrasensory perception with you here today. So, where I want to start is kind of jump to the end of your book here, because in chapter 13 of your book, you say that the future is not about robots, it's about us and achieving our human potential, which I absolutely agree. But it really seems like something or someone is wanting to take a shortcut route, right? And merge humans with synthetic AI robots. Because I think it's quite possible that someone is absolutely terrified of our human potential, right? Of our natural abilities that each and every one of us have. And in order to not let those abilities develop naturally and organically, they're going to introduce a human robot augmentation so that we can be controlled, so that it can be controlled. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not aware of any plans, but the extent that our sensory capabilities have recently been shown to be much greater than anyone had any idea would strike fear in the heart of anyone trying to control humanity, because we are just exquisite human beings. One of my mentors is a 40-year MIT anthropologist who just knows all the exceptional performers around the world, all the Qigong masters and the elite lamas and everything. And he says, we are the finest technology on the planet. And this is not a man who does not also know about AI and robotics and everything else. He says, absolutely not. No machine can match us. We are soft tissue, high technology. It's right here.
What I was referring to mostly was Elon Musk Neuralink implants, but his brain chips, right? He just got approved for human experimentation for his Neuralink brain chip implants.
And I mean, Elon is visionary and interesting in his way, but didn't he just hurt a bunch of monkeys trying to test all of this? So I'm not sure how he even managed approval for human trials.
Yeah, and something really interesting in your book as well is you kind of cover all of the human senses, right? The importance of human senses, and that everything that's been attributed to the animal kingdom, we also have within us. And the first point,
Humans outperform dogs and rats and mice in laboratories in many instances. Humans can follow a scent trail on their hands and knees like a hound. They've tested this. So it's really Victorian era myth that we are not animals, and super predators among them. We reign supreme over the animal kingdom. And I like to say, if you don't believe me, read the headlines. But we're feral in all the wrong ways, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree. And the first one that you cover is smell, right? And I think this is a very important superhuman ability, because I think that our that ability is very underutilized by humans, but animals.
It is underutilized. And I speak to this really cool professor of sensory cognition, David House, in the book. You probably remember him. And he says, the nose has been kept down too long. What is all this deodorizing and reodorizing we put our bodies through? Isn't it peculiar? And he notes that all the perfumes are really floral, except for something like opium, and they don't move the parameters much. And it's even as there's a sensory renaissance going on in research and even in business, there's this homogenization that's at work too. So it's really, they used to think we could smell 10,000 things, which is a lot. I don't even know if I can name 10,000 things, but recent studies prove it's a trillion. And smell, olfaction is so tied to memory. It goes straight to our memory banks. That's why Proust wrote of the Madeleine and his aunt. Eating a Madeleine could evoke memories of Sundays with his aunt. It just turns the memories right on. So, yeah, smell is incredible. And I think you remember the woman I spoke with named Joy Milne in the book. She's a super smeller. She's a retired Scottish nurse and grandmother, and she smelled her husband's body odor change. And this was 6 years before he developed Parkinson's disease. And at first she thought, well, he's sweating because he works really long hours as an anesthesiologist. But freshly showered, he smelled bad. So she finally convinced researchers to take a look at it. And sure enough, she's a super smeller. And with researchers, she isolated the molecules in the sebum on your back, in the back of your neck and running down, which is a really telling area for illness, apparently. And now they know the molecular biomarkers for Parkinson's, and they can identify it as soon as 10 years, as many as 10 years earlier than before. Which is not a cure, of course, but it means that doctors can intervene early and provide really good supportive care and keep an eye on such folks. And she's also working on cancer detection, tuberculosis detection, and COVID. She can smell COVID. So, in another scenario, in less enlightened circles, it would be about artificial means of doing this, or something mechanical. But it's just a woman who loved her husband, who noticed he had changed. What's more beautiful than that? That's nature. And now she's helping a lot of people.
Yeah, I feel like that emphasis isn't put on human beings enough. Like, people have, you always hear the stories of like dogs doing that for humans, like acting
Mhm.
really strange around them, and sniffing out cancer before the cancer actually develops, and then
Yes, they
the pet
can.
owner goes to the hospital and realizes that they have a really bad illness.
Yeah, which is not to put down our loyal companions, right? I know you don't mean it that way,
Right.
but well, there is a reason, and I'll say it now. The reason we became separated, compartmentalized from the rest of nature, was that in the 19th century, a scientist named Paul Broca just had a theory that humans had really small olfactory bulbs. And we don't in absolute terms, meaning compared to the size of our body. They're as large or larger than dogs and other animals. And but he popularized this erroneous idea, and even Sigmund Freud got behind him. Insert joke here. So all this uptight Victorian era stuff was the context. And like, oh no, you can't be animalistic. You're human. You're something separate, something special, something not as base. And in fact, we are just animals in the end.
Yes, and I thought it was interesting that you brought up earlier a smell of like memory, right? Because I know that everyone is listening, and I know for sure that you have smelled something that triggers you back to like your childhood. I'll get that
Absolutely.
instance all the time. Like I'll be walking through the store, the grocery store, and I'll get a whiff of something, and then automatically I'm back to like 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah, something mom or grandma made, right? Or dad. It's astonishing how instant it is. It just transports you. And so in that chapter, that first chapter you referenced about smell, what I'm really trying to show is that these are myths, that we are not powerful, that we are not capable, that we do not have instincts, and validate things like you just said now, that you've personally experienced it. And we need to start a conversation about our senses and these impressions. So I moved from Joy Milne in that chapter, the wonderful woman who's helping with Parkinson's and other things, to a mom of four named Carrie Barcombe in Pennsylvania. She's a phenomenal painter. And one of her friends noticed that she smells a lot of things. Carrie does. And she told her about Joy Milne, the grandma helping with Parkinson's. And Carrie just flashed back through her whole life and realized, yes, I smell something sour when my children are getting stomach viruses. I smell burning in my mouth when I'm getting a cavity, etc. And I say, please think of me, the author, as the friend who tells Carrie, I believe you. This is true. This is possible.
Have you ran into anybody that has all of these extra sensory perceptions at like full tilt? Like their vision is amazing, their hearing is amazing, their smell is amazing, and their taste
I
is amazing.
actually haven't run into someone with all five senses on that level, but often smell and taste go together, and I'm sure that makes sense to you. So I interview a couple of sommeliers for the book, and they are super smellers and super tasters. But one thing everyone seems to have in common among people with great senses is they are synesthetes. They're people who have bonus sensory impressions for their traditional senses. So, for example, I'm a synesthete. If I see 5 on the front page of the New York Times, the numeral, it's black on a beige background, but it's also navy blue. And I happen to have tetrachromacy or super color vision.
We've been led to believe that we only see a certain percentage of the light spectrum. And in your book, and you just mentioned that you have a extrasensory color perception.
Yeah,
So
I have a mutation in my eyes, and I have 4 cone classes for color perception instead of 3. So I see like a bird, and just this massive spectrum. And that manifests in interesting ways because my whole life was like the what color is the dress internet flame war. I never agree with people. about what color things are. So it was this theme my entire life until, and it's very symbolic too, I think, because the testing for this was only available recently, right? And I recognized myself in a podcast on Radiolab that interviewed another woman with it. It's very rare, but we're finally coming into this sensory renaissance, and it's possible to get tested for such things. And I wonder how many more are out there, not only vision, but all the senses, but who either don't get the validation they need, right? Or it might not be rising to conscious awareness, or it's dismissed somehow. But I think people, as Marvin Gaye said, we're all sensitive people. And I think just starting the conversation is going to make people aware what's going on in their own bodies, because we don't really talk about it that much now.
Do you think that you have a whole chapter in your book pertaining to consciousness? Do you think that there are extrasensory consciousness that you can, like remote viewing, right? I'm sure you're
Oh,
familiar
yeah.
with
Oh,
remote
yeah.
viewing. What's your thoughts and theories on remote viewing?
Well, in fact, I'm speaking at the International Remote Viewing Association event next month in Charlottesville. I'm fascinated by all of that. I know it's real. I've seen it demonstrated. I've tried it myself. And I believe that's the frontier. So the question is, are our senses so powerful, right? So what are we talking about here? We can see light at the level of a single photon, smell a trillion things we've talked about. We can hear sounds with amplitudes smaller than an atom. And hearing is our most wide ranging sense, too, 20 hertz up to 20,000. We have a new set of, not new, but newly discovered set of taste buds for fresh water. Sounds like a good idea, Mother Nature, right? And out at the University of California, they gave people 2 pieces of silicon, smooth silicon, only except on one, they bound an extra layer of molecules to it. People can feel that with their bare fingertips. So these are the newly adjusted traditional sensory potentials, which go into the quantum and proven in laboratories. So I think it should give more credence and more interest to remote sensing, which for those, I doubt there's a single person in your audience who doesn't know this, but in case, a person who would not have to be in the same location as the stimulus or even necessarily the same era of time. And if our traditional senses are operating on this minuscule and quantum, in many cases, scales, why not? I have a very open mind about such things. And I've also been privileged to see it demonstrated in really mind-blowing ways.
There's an argument that is, well, not really an argument, but a discrepancy within the remote viewing community. A lot of people have different thoughts and ideas about how it works. Some people think that it's a separation of consciousness, that your consciousness is separating from your body, and that's how you're able to remote view and see things that are not even close to where you are in your immediate vicinity. And then other people think that it's within you, that you're going into such a deep self hypnosis or a deep meditative state that you're actually seeing the things outside of yourself within yourself. How do you think
Wow.
that remote viewing actually works?
I am not sure which is the thesis I would lean toward. I'd love to learn more about the 2 points of view, but if you ask the way I think it works, I prefer the term remote sensing because in my own experience and those of people I've interviewed, it's never just the third eye. Someone might feel a change of temperature on their arm, smell something, taste something, pardon me, hear something. So it's all the clairs, right? It's clairvoyance, clairaudience, all of it. So I think if I were to give a definition of any sort of it, I would insist on saying it's remote sensing and people need to use their entire bodies. Because it's not just visual. And could it be some sort of loosening of the etheric body or some sort of thing where, like an NDE or an OBE, where people have awareness outside of their own immediate environment? Perhaps. I mean, I just hope this all gets researched more and more and more because I think the mind is the true spaceship. Going back to Elon and his death march to Mars, right? I think that it's all about developing our minds. That's
I
what we're
think
here
so
for.
too. I agree with that, and I think the space is the space in our behind our eyes and in front of our ears, right?
Yes.
And that is the space that needs to be explored. But to your thought and your idea about NDEs and out of body experiences, that's a common thread that I've seen with a lot of these remote viewers, especially the most prolific remote viewers of our time, like Ingo Swann. He always talked about whenever he was younger, he would always constantly have these out of body experiences, like near
Wow.
death experiences, right? And that's a common
Good
thing
point.
that I've found within researching this and talking to a lot of the remote viewers that were from the official uh, DIA Army Intelligence remote viewing program was a lot of them had near death experiences, or a lot of them had out of body experiences whenever they were younger. So I think that there's a connection there between, and a lot of people will refute this. A lot of the people, the researchers of remote viewing that I've had on my show, they refute that idea that somehow the out of body experience or near death experience was a trigger for them unlocking that ability. They all say, no, it's not connected at all. But I think that it is. I think that it's a jump start for them to unlock that potential within them. I think that everyone has the potential to be able to remote view and have these extrasensory
Yes, I think
perceptions,
so too.
but it takes some kind of trauma or some sort of out of body experience that might be induced by trauma, like Ingo Swann being bullied because he was gay whenever he was younger, and that induced this out of body experience. And somehow that out of body experience unlocks the potential to have these extrasensory perception abilities.
It may be the case. I haven't really delved into that research, but I think it's quite possible. And another aspect of that, which is related to NDEs, OBEs, is I've interviewed Ed May several times, the former head of Stargate,
Mm.
and Joe McMoneagle, his top viewer, top sensor. And they tell me the top people in that program, including Joe, were synesthetes. They were all people who had this hyper-connected brain with extra bonus senses, seeing color when listening to music, seeing color when they read or look at numbers. So Ed is in fact still working on a model about this, but it may have something to do with the hyperconnectivity of synesthetes' minds because we're all born synesthetes, according to research. But at 4 months, a pruning goes on of the neurons in the brain for most people. And synesthetes, the pruning never happens. So just like a baby is a sponge and takes everything in, I think that might have a factor, may play a factor. And to bring back in your NDE, OBE fascinating theory, many synesthetes have OBEs, and many people who have NDEs come back as synesthetes and were never synesthetes before. And I would like to point to the work of PMH Atwater about all of that. She's done incredible work logging all the cases. And one other thing Joe McMoneagle told me, he said synesthetes are the shamans. They're the shamans of yore. And we don't have a context for it in most modern circles now, right? Unfortunately. But that's who they were through history.
There's actually this document that I wanted to show because I've been telling people about this document forever now, and this is a good opportunity to show it. And it's the syndicate document. This is a syndicate document, which was an SRI document in '73, and people. This is a very difficult document to get a hold of. Some people have never even seen it, let alone have access to it. And syndicate was an SRI program that was funded by the CIA. And this goes into Ingo Swann and Pat Price's remote viewings of this base that they found, that base in West Virginia, right? That pretty much put remote viewing on the map. And this is Ingo Swann's depiction and drawing of that military base in West Virginia. But the fascinating part was after they gave it to Pat Price, and then Pat Price came up with a very detailed, much more detailed, which is here, and he's describing here the weather, that it's cloudy, that it's rainy, that the temperature and the altitude, and all of this stuff. And then how Putoff gives it to him again, and then he describes, to try and get classified information, he gets the names of the facility that was there. He said that it sounded like what it seemed like hayfork or haystack. And then he saw these papers on a desk that said fly trap and mine run. The text is really small; it's difficult for me to read it. And then he got the operation of the facility, which went under code names, which was revolved around pool, which was cue ball, 14 ball, 4 ball, 8 ball, and rack up. And he also got the names of the generals that was at this top secret military base that absolutely no one in the world even knew about. So that's how amazing remote viewing is, and how amazing, and reading through all these documents, like I have all of the government remote viewing documents, the Sunstreak documents, Girl Flame documents, Syndicate documents, Stargate documents. I've read through all of them, and people that don't necessarily believe in this type of ability, I tell them, well, the government sure believed in it. They believed
Still
in
does,
that
right?
they had a program, right? Yeah.
Did it go black? I don't know. They closed Stargate, but there's no shortage of remote sensors getting trained in America on an ongoing basis. And if it's not the government, it's Wall Street, right? It's business everywhere. A lot of people are highly paid remote sensors. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's fact, right? So this is the frontier. It's really interesting.
So do you think kids are more like susceptible to these abilities, such as extrasensory taste, extrasensory smell, extrasensory hearing, and vision, and touch? Do you think that they're more adaptive to that kind of ability, and then it kind of gets dumbed down in a certain way or pushed to the background? as they get older through social norms and things like that, they don't talk about it, so therefore it doesn't develop as they get
I
older.
think you're absolutely right. I think we are born perfect. Even people with challenges have many corners of perfection in their sensorium. And other cultures besides the West, besides the United States, I shouldn't say the West, because in France, they train children beautifully in the senses from a very young age. So it's about opening up, but the senses are also plastic. So even if we didn't get a good sensory education as children, we can do so as adults.
So an adult it could be trained to pick up on things that they normally wouldn't realize. That's what you're saying, correct?
Yes, yes. I give the example of a scientist who worked in the Monell Center in Philadelphia, and he volunteered to work with a really unpleasant solution because he literally could not genetically smell it. Half of humans can't. And after several weeks exposure, he too began to smell the chemicals. So it's about exposure in a big way. It's about awareness. It's about practice. Joy Milne, who can smell COVID and cancer and tuberculosis and Parkinson's, told me smell everything twice, at least. When you smell an aroma, inhale it twice. And she talks about how that aids your memory of it and your ability to smell it and recall it and identify it.
Do you have any opinions, I suppose, on the UFO and extraterrestrial phenomenon? And is there any connections here between your research and anything to do with extraterrestrials or UFOs?
I didn't get into it in this book because there was just so much. Not because I don't believe it's a valid topic, but it's interesting because my editor asked me about ufology at one point over lunch. And my response to her is my response to you. I believe it's a type of sensing like any other. The experiencers are usually sensitive people. And then when you look at Kit Green's research with the caudate putamen and brain waves, etc., there are physiological differences in experiencers. There are brainwave differences. So there's even DNA marker, right? They found a DNA marker. So I believe that's also a frontier of sensory awareness. Some people even know, look at Chris Bledsoe, for example. He knows when they're coming in. It's not just that he experiences it, he predicts it. So that would be an amazing area for them to open up a whole lot of research. More research they've begun.
Yeah, that was kind of the thought on the tip of my tongue while reading your book, and I was kind of not disappointed, but because the UFO phenomena and extraterrestrial phenomena is such a big topic right now
It
in
is
this
a big
space,
topic.
exactly. And
Yeah, there was just so much to cover.
yeah,
But perhaps a future work. It's a valid point you raise. George Orwell wrote in 1984 that the party's chief goal was to make you not believe your own eyes and ears. Chief
yeah.
goal. So the better we manage our own senses, the better off we are. And I'm not just talking about Orwellian scenarios. I mean, it's good for our survival. The first IQ tests were measurements of the senses, not of cognitive ability other than that. But they discarded them because they couldn't predict academic achievement. And now that we're in a world where maybe it's a better idea to go to a trade school in terms of academic achievement, or maybe it's better to be an entrepreneur or what have you. I think with the emphasis moving away from traditional intelligence, perhaps we'll get to a place where people like Joy Milne, who can smell disease, are considered the geniuses.
Yeah, there was a huge shift into testing and academically scoring people. I mean, I don't even think in some states they even have any form of PE anymore. Like there's not any movement. It's just like you're a prisoner in a classroom for 8 hours a day every day.
It's awful. And as you know in the book, I talk about how that dulls the senses. The EPA did a study that determined Americans, and subsequent studies added Canadians and Europeans too, international studies, spend 90% of their lives indoors.
Mm.
And as I say in the book, we pity the caged bird, the shelter dog, the elephant in the circus. And we do this to ourselves willfully.
Yeah.
What is that? It's I can't believe I'm out every day. I'm a birder.
Do you think
So
that
I'm
that's
out
due to
in the woods,
technology?
I'm out on the beach. Pardon?
Do you think that that's due to technology? This
It could
technological
be.
advancement?
It could be. Yeah, we're all chained to our screens now and our phones, but I think it's also like I don't know. It's quote unquote civilization, right? We built cities and we hid inside, but it's not our nature as animals.
It's interesting because whenever you go out and you walk around and there seems to be a lack of confidence within a lot of people, right? They're always looking down. They're never looking ahead. They're never looking up. They're never looking at the sky, right? And I think that's the most fascinating part about nature is the sky and what we're in and what we're doing. They're very unaware of their surroundings and what's going
Yeah.
on in their reality. They're focused at looking down, looking at their phone or looking at their feet as they walk instead of looking up.
I'm so happy to hear you say this because this is actually one of the main parts of the conversation I hope the book ignites. How are we living? What are we doing? Is this why the environment is a mess? Because we never go in the environment, so we don't care what happens outside? Probably that's part of it. And, my affection for birds through my work as a photographer, I'm also a photographer. We've lost a third of them since the 1970s due to environmental problems. So it can only help us, it can only help all of creation to live more naturally and out of doors more often and get in touch with our senses. Because in addition to the 90% of Westerners holding up inside, there's other research. Researchers looked at indigenous hunter-gatherers in Malaysia, tested their ability to smell, tested their ability to name colors. They were much better at it than the rest of us. So
Yeah, and that could be because of
I know it's hard to live that way, right? We can't all go find an island somewhere, but we certainly can be out of doors more often than we are.
yeah, and we can take our shoes off and walk around in the grass with our bare feet, right?
I do that, yes.
Ground ourselves to the earth. Like it seems like that people would rather, these days would rather film something on their phone than actually
See it
experience it
with their eyes.
or even help somebody that's in trouble. They would rather film the fight or film someone instead of jumping in and breaking up, or they would rather film someone drowning in a pool than actually jump in and save them.
Yeah.
Right?
There's some kind of disconnect that goes on where we can't separate fact from fiction. So I don't know. I don't think it's the media necessarily driving that, although consumerism drives that, right? And advertising in media has a lot to do with that. But this idea that we need to be inside and not seeing the sun or the sky or each other is kind of twisted. I'm a journalist, and I'm not naive to that. I think it's terribly naive not to think there are. However, it's early, and I think this research came out all at once and kind of surprised everyone. And I wanted to get out ahead of anything negative associated with this and raise people's awareness. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to publish with a major publisher and talk with thoughtful people like you about it, because I want people to know. I say in the book, it's like finding out the oil painting your grandmother willed to you is an old master, except you are the painting. You're much finer than you know. People are magnificent beyond measure.
Then that brings in the question, have we done this to ourselves, right? Because I think that people always want some sort of outside force that's manipulating people and making them do a certain thing, when really that's our responsibility. No one can really tell
Yeah,
us
people
what
need
to
to take
do and what not to do.
responsibility, which is not to say there isn't propaganda in the world and there isn't, there aren't efforts to control humanity. However, yeah, we need to step up and take responsibility for ourselves and work on our own bodies and minds. We're fortunate, you and I. We live in the internet age. So much is available on podcasts like yours and in all sorts of formats. So I really hope people get the chance to do more with their senses.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. And they can definitely pick up your book. Where is it going to? It's going to be released in August, correct?
August 8th, Tuesday, August 8th. It's available for pre order now online on the Macmillan website, which is the parent company to St. Martin's Press, my publisher, on Amazon, on all sorts of good websites. And I have a website for the book. It's my name, maureenseaberg.com. And I welcome anyone to write me there. I'd love to hear what people's experiences are with their own senses, because I am sure they're incredibly varied and interesting. And I'd love to hear from your viewers.
Yes, absolutely. The links to her website will be in the description of this video. Thanks so much for coming on and speaking with me about this. I
It's my
recommend
pleasure.
recommend her book. It'll be out in August. Can they get to that through your website as well?
Yes,
The
absolutely.
pre-order.
There's a pre order link on the homepage.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And thanks for everyone watching and listening. Much love to everyone in the chat. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel in their algorithms. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications. And please follow the show on all podcast platforms, Rokfin, Odysee, and Rumble. The links are all in the description. And remember, we're not only in a spiritual war, but a war on humanity. Stay aware, stay alert, keep love in your heart for everyone. Stay safe out there. And if you can see through the illusion, you are the solution. See you guys next time.